Welcome to the Gig Solution. I'm James, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague and partner, Spunk Burke, the creator of the Gig Solution methodology, the author of the Gig Solution books, the original in 2017, co-author of the second edition that we just published this year in 2026, and the senior coach of the Gig Solution program, taking displaced mid-level professionals from job applicants fighting a broken traditional job search system to solution vendors earning executive fees and delivering outcomes to companies anxious to engage their expertise. We're here because a lot of good people are losing their livelihood these days, and they have no clear path back to stability. And using traditional job methods that have stopped working the way they're supposed to just isn't going to cut it anymore. Spunk, people know you as an author and a coach, but not many people know how you actually developed the experience and expertise that underpinned your writing and coaching. So let's talk about that first. Where did you start?
First of all, let me say I'm delighted to be here. James and I have worked on a solution to the audience's situation, which is stressful and anxious, and I'm eager to spread the news as widely as we possibly can. But I think the question was, how did I get started in this? What prompted me to write the book? And it goes way back to when I graduated from college. And was looking for an opportunity and happened to land in what we call the temporary help industry. And I started selling engineering services on a not a project basis, really on a temp basis. And moved from there to selling programming services. As a matter of fact, I was the first person in America to sell programmers on an hourly basis. And we filled that void, and it turned out to be a billion-dollar industry. And so we've gone from engineering to data processing. I've done some contract work with the trades, and most recently, back in 2015, it occurred to me that the only discipline of labor, James, that had not been represented by this growing staffing industry, this contracting industry, is the business professional. And so I've got a few years under my belt in terms of watching this thing grow, watching this thing happen, and that's why I think we've got a pretty good beat on where it's going next.
Tell me a little bit about that company called Manpower that you have mentioned in the past. It's kind of like probably the founding.
Well, after World War II, there was a big gap in the source of labor. And so the American business was trying to produce and build and make us the grand country we are, but they needed help. They just could not staff their plants with enough people. And so Manpower, I think they were out of Chicago, decided to provide people on a temporary basis. Now, obviously, we're not talking about business professionals. We're talking about people on the production line. All right. And so they were brought in to address peaks. Okay. There was a lot of flexibility. As soon as the peak passed, we could get rid of the temporary labor. So it was at the right place at the right time. They weren't project oriented. They weren't contract oriented. They just came in on an hourly basis, did the work until it was done, and then released.
So, you have obviously, you didn't work at Manpower, but you have been doing this a long time. You've been doing this for decades. What pattern, if any, what was occurring to you that kept showing up that you kept seeing? Was there something like that kind of drove you to the idea that writing a book would be a useful way to help more people rather than just individually, one-on-one or one-on small groups, but generating a book? Because, when you wrote the first Gig Solution in 2016 and published it in 2017, that was, before AI made it easy to write a book. You actually had to write it. And it's an impressive thing to do pre-AI. So I'm just interested in your, what drove you in that direction.
Okay, well, as an innovator and recognizing that the data processing industry needed some support at the coding level, at the programming level, I took the torch and ran with it. And as I said, it became $1 billion industry. And in the back of my mind, I've always concerned myself with the only discipline of labor not to be represented by the staffing industry, the temporary staffing industry, the contract project staffing industry, is the business professional. Now, I'm not talking about consultants. I'm talking about workers who come in to do a specific task. And I didn't really understand why they weren't addressed. Well, first of all, there wasn't the situation we've got now where these people have been released from their positions as U.S. and world organizations have flattened, trying to become more profitable. And with the use of AI, being able to accomplish a lot of what these people did in their management function. As time turns out, more and more people are finding themselves on the outside. They've lost their jobs that they didn't expect to lose. And it seems like while my timing may have been a little premature with the Gig Solution First Edition, it's spot on right now.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, that was a lot of what got me excited about, this when you asked me to work on it with you. 'Cause I don't really identify with boomers. My dad's a boomer, but I'm 57, and I am right in the center of the bullseye. It's, people I know, people that, went to college the same time I did, and that are finding themselves in this situation. People who have built a life around an understanding that what they were doing was going to last, until they were ready to walk away. And that's, what led to the, update of the Gig Solution book into the second edition. And these last few years, I think that it's really crystallized, and it's only gaining steam at this point, I would say.
Well, I agree. Your audience is getting much larger. Unfortunately, these are the people who are out of work. And these people, again, are business professionals. Engineers don't need to pick up this book. Programmers don't need to pick up this book. Doctors, lawyers, nobody needs to pick up this book because they've already, acclimated to that type of working environment. But the business professional who's looking for his next job, who's under an incredible amount of stress because that job has been eliminated, James. It's not a matter of sending out 100 or 200 or 300 resumes. If I just send one more, I may get it. No, it's gone. And we have to deal with that reality. And I think that's why the book, at least the initial edition, was so important, is that it just brought to light that this is what's occurring. You can either get on board now or see where we're going. But with the second edition, we've gone beyond just heralding the news. We're really put together the foundation for a coaching program so that it goes beyond just awareness, but how to actually execute.
Right, exactly. And that's where I come in. When we, it's probably as good a time as any to say a little bit about my background. I do have a law degree, was a lawyer in another life. I have many years in marketing, many years in building companies from nothing to, quite successful. One company in particular, we grew to multiple 10 figures, multiple 9 figures. And it was a very, what's 9 figures? Over 100 million? Okay, multiple 8 figures. I got to scale back, but you get the idea. It was a very successful project, and I had a lot of experience in that. And when we originally started working together, it was specifically focusing on one project that you were in that you needed some help with, and I came in and we started working on that. And as we got to know each other, and as COVID came out and it changed the landscape dramatically for all kinds of employment, and we started having these conversations, and your background started to come to the fore, and I really got a much greater respect for you, quite frankly. I think I mentioned this to you before. I'm like, I had no idea what your background was, and as the more I looked into it, and then I got a copy of the original book and went through it and really got to understand this. And then AI came out, and it started changing things in an order of magnitude beyond anything that COVID and remote work was. It became readily apparent just how appropriate this methodology is today for this audience more than ever before. And so I was really excited and honored to be asked by you to come in and help you update the book and develop a program that can reach many more people, and in a way that can really help them absorb and utilize this strategy to replacing a traditional job with something even better. And so that's what the program itself, the coaching program, is all about. It's taking the book and putting it into real actionable steps that lead to an outcome, which is essentially what being a solution vendor is about versus being a consultant. You want to just talk about the difference between those two things a little bit?
Well, you touched upon it. I mean, my perception of the consulting industry, which has been around for decades, is basically bringing in these highly degreed, accomplished executives into basically advising, assessing situations, and coming up with strategy and advising. Whereas the contract project worker, the solution vendor, is a business professional who comes in with a scope of work, with a plan, with the ability to deliver results and be released, being paid just for those results. And it's again a time that's come. And I think to many executives, just to digress here for a second, on first pass, it seems a little unfamiliar, uncomfortable, a little anxious. I'm not going to have a standard employer who takes care of my benefits and my time and pays me accordingly. No, those are gone. We know that, okay? But what's come in its place is the ability to be self-sufficient, the ability to control your work, either ramp it up or bring it down to something that's a little bit easier to handle. It's about coming up with your own game plan, soliciting approvals on that game plan, executing to your standards, and delivering results is very, very satisfying. And so what's going to happen is we're going to find ourselves saying, where's the next project? Well, the good news is you're going to be able to find it. You're going to have the skills necessary to be able to conduct your marketing so you can have a backlog of projects, and it's going to be a far more secure work life than you've had before, with the axe always ready to fall on you.
Yeah, speaking of the axe falling, what's really interestingly made this feel much more real and immediate to me is the conversations that we've had recently, where people that you've known, socially for any number of years, but the conversation never really, went to about work, because their work was not your kind of work, and why talk about it? And suddenly these people are starting to turn the conversation towards unexpected job loss and really a shock to their whole system, their belief system, their identity, and they're coming to you with this, and wonderfully you have something to respond with, other than, wow, that's horrible. Yeah. You can actually, yeah. But what have you noticed about what they're talking about when it comes to, say, LinkedIn and their networks and stuff like that? It seems to be there's some common themes going on.
Yeah, I can't say that up in my neck of the woods I've got a huge social network, but it makes it all that more interesting in that I've got so many people that I do know that are in that position right now. These people are typically 45 to 65 years old, and they've got a couple of kids, and they've got a mortgage, and they've relied on a paycheck and benefits for years and years and years, like their folks did. And all of a sudden, to find themselves cut loose and independent is somewhat nerve-wracking, to say the least. And so, as you say, I'm delighted to be in a position, based upon my background, to be able to afford and offer some real executable items that they can do to get back to work much more quickly than if they stayed on that path of trying to find the next job.
Yeah, and one thing that kind of was a little bit surprising, when I heard you mention it, that they've mentioned, and it seems to be becoming endemic, is these, people are who were very active on social media, in the LinkedIn, in their profiles, where everybody comes to do business, in the digital, around the digital water cooler, so to speak. And they figured, I'll just reach out to my networks. That's what I've been told. That's, how easy it is. I could just get out there. And they're reaching out to people that they were normally in a regular dialogue when they had a position. And now that they don't, and the conversation has turned to, hey, I'm available, it's crickets. And that's, that's shocking a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it's only because they're going about it the wrong way. You don't call your network and say, hey, I'm available, I'm looking for work. That's not going to fly.
I'm single.
Because I'm single. It's for all, the reason primarily is because at that level of management, there is no work per se as we know it. However, you can use that same network and use it strategically in a marketing fashion so that you can identify work that nobody knows about. Your network doesn't know about it.
Right.
You're going to be the one who's going to be taught the skills to say, hey, this is an opportunity. This isn't a job posting. This is that hidden market of project opportunities. And we know how to uncover it.
Right. And that's essentially where the Gig Solutions, mantra is from. It's don't apply, vend. You're not coming in with your hat in your hand looking for a position. You're coming in with a solution that's got a identifiable value, a high value to an entity, and they're like, well, wow, and if you're actually looking for a job, like you've mentioned to me repeatedly, what better way to actually find your way into a position, not sending your resume through an ATS, but actually coming in, solving a real world problem for a company you might like to work with, and they, cut you a check, thrilled at the outcome. Who would they hire before you?
Well, they sort of invalidate. I'm talking about the business, the buyer. Okay, the reason we used this project contractor was to save money, and at the end of the project, they're tempted. They're saying, "Geez, we didn't have a job opening, but we'd love to have you join the team." So that can work to your favor, of course. But my advice would be, don't get seduced back into that type of situation again.
Yeah, building your own prison. Why do it? So, we've seen the death of the social contract, which is a phrase that I've heard you use, before, where it really used to be simple. And I know that this was it's my generation, and my parents and my grandparents. There was a social contract that, you went to work, you went to school, like for executive work or climbing the ladder in a corporation of any description. You came out with a degree, you got hired based on, your achievements or whatever, and you went in and you went to work. You learned that business and you devoted yourself to that employer and to producing, climbing that ladder. And, with your eye on the horizon, where it was, you get the house, you pay off the mortgage, you put your kids through school, and, you end up with the gold watch and the retirement party, and you sail off into the sunset. And suddenly that is just evaporating, and it's evaporating for millions of people and virtually overnight. And that's a really scary thing.
Well, we understand the emotion that goes along with having the rug pulled out from underneath you. We also recognize that this represents a real paradigm shift. When we're suggesting that you stop applying, you stop looking for this job that's so elusive, and start looking at projects and start selling solutions, that too is a paradigm shift. You're going to need some help, and that's what we're here for. We've got some instructions, we've got a methodology, we've got a strategy that works. and it'll help you get over that hurdle of starting out so that you're in a position where you can land a project within a matter of weeks rather than months, etc.
And what's interesting is, a lot of the companies that, you'll find yourself vending a solution to are the same companies that are letting, huge swaths of people go, assuming that, AI or one person with an increased span of control is going to step in and do the job of 20 people. And it isn't only struggling companies that are facing this problem. There are profitable companies, some of the biggest companies in the world. We just heard about Oracle trimming 18,000 people. And before that, it was Amazon. Larry Ellison and Jeff Bezos are consecutively every year two of the richest men on earth. So I think that's what makes this different. What would you say to people who want to believe that maybe this is just another cyclical thing and that everything's going to go back to normal one day?
Yeah, well, that's wishful thinking. I suppose that it's understandable. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the statistics, if you analyze the data, you're going to see that this is not cyclical. This ain't going to change, all right? In fact, the good news is it's going to start dropping from the large multi-billion-dollar companies where they're saying, boy, we could make a lot more profit if we got rid of 10% of our workforce. That kind of thinking is correct, frankly. It's a little harsh, but it is correct. And it's going to start drifting down into smaller companies and smaller companies. And so a 100-person organization is going to start thinking, maybe we can release some of our workforce and bring in business professionals to run projects, outsource this work. See, even though the workers are gone, the work continues. The work continues and has to be addressed, but to be able to purchase results instead of hiring people to create results is very, very attractive. And it may require some training, some education, where you go in and you let the individual who's in charge of the department understand that there are ways of dealing with change and with objectives and challenges that don't require the old solution, which is let's go hire somebody.
So, and that pretty much leads us right to the next, thing we should talk about a little bit more, is who this program really is for and who it's not for. This isn't for your entry level, your recent grad, your entry level person, or somebody who just doesn't really have, a significant amount of experience in their position, nor is it for somebody in the C-suite. There's headhunters and recruiters, and there's a whole industry focused on helping those people bounce from one stone in the river to the next stone in the river while everybody else is getting flushed away. And it's the middle floors that are really getting squeezed in this organizational flattening, and that's who the gig solution is really designed to help.
Right. It's those floors that are getting squeezed, but also those floors that have the opportunity. And
Exactly.
what's going to happen is that, as you say, we're not talking about retirees who come in as interim executives or board members or fractional executives. We're talking about business professionals in our audience right now who can point to achievements, can point to over the last 3 years specific accomplishments that they can confidently repeat and provide again. Those are the people, age 45 to 60, as I've said. Just on that subject of ageism, which I know a little bit about, as you can probably gather, is real in today's marketplace. We're not going to pussyfoot around it, okay? If you're over 45, if you're over 50, you will not get the same consideration as a young Turk at 30 years old. End of story. However, it doesn't come into play when you're selling a solution, all right? I don't care if the solution's brought in by my great-grandfather, as long as you use the right methodologies and it's a solution that I need and want, I'll pay for it.
And it's probably worth addressing a concern that a lot of people might have in the back of their mind, like, well, how much opportunity is there really out there? And in developing the second edition of the book and in developing the program and really wanting to be able to address that concern for people, we could just spill it, here and now. The companies are spending about 1.2 or 1.3 trillion dollars a year across the board on outside help, outside talent, outside expertise. I'm not saying that there's 1.2 trillion dollars floating around out there for mid-level professionals that we help, but it is absolutely defensible and safe to say that hundreds of billions of dollars will be spent on people that they bring in from the outside. And the difference between bringing somebody in from the outside who consults and who looks at something, identifies a problem, makes some suggestions, and bringing somebody in who says, yeah, okay, I see this solution, now I'm going to deliver the outcome for you, and it's going to be worth about this much to you, and it's going to take about this much time, give or take a week or two. That is a different value proposition altogether, and that is what we train people to be as solution vendors.
And
That opportunity
I'd point
is
out,
huge.
well, and it's getting bigger, which is what I was going to point out, okay? Unlike the size of organizations, which is trending down as they cut levels of labor, the need for outsourced solutions is going to continue to grow. So we're at really the front door to this new discipline of labor being an option for business executives to consider for building their business. And it's going to become well traveled. In other words, right now, some of our audience are going to be the first to bring this subject up to business people who are in a position to buy. But in a matter of time, and I think rather quickly, if it's anything like what I saw with engineers and with programmers, it's going to become an accepted way of doing things, which means that they'll become more sophisticated in their purchasing process. The competition's going to be that much stronger. It's going to resemble what the labor market was 10 years ago, okay, where you're competing with hundreds of candidates. But right now, for people who act and move boldly into this new space, there's advantages to being the first to reap the rewards, not the least of which is you're not going to have any competition.
Right. And none of this opportunity is running through a job board or through a resume or an ATS.
No, you may, I just not to contradict you, but on the job boards, we've got a strategy that enables us to be able to identify between the lines what might be a project.
Okay. But the traditional intent of the job board, you're not going to see that
right.
unless you know how to look for it. And that's one of the
right.
elements of the gig solution.
Exactly.
I think, a good thing for you to probably share a little bit about is a phrase that I really have come to appreciate, which is the experienced supply chain. And that's essentially what this is developing.
Yeah, this is the crown of the experienced supply chain. 50 years ago, the founder of Digital Equipment Corporation, Ken Olsen, developed the material supply chain, which basically meant that we'd only buy materials that we were going to immediately use, and we wouldn't store or warehouse any superfluous equipment. Well, the experience supply chain is the same thing. It applies to individual skills and experience that can be tapped upon, brought in, used for a project, used for a small period of time, and then released. It's an incredibly efficient way to proceed.
Mm-hmm. So, this is getting close. We're at 30 minutes now, and I'm sure people have heard enough from you and I, but there's a couple of things I just want to make sure we touch on before we wrap it up. Going forward, this series is going to be a conversation that goes really wherever it needs to go over the coming weeks and months. We have dozens of topics that we already have scheduled for discussion. All are specifically focused on helping our audience navigate these uncharted waters and find a way back to dry land. For millions of professionals, the traditional job search actively works against people at their level, and we're going to dig into how the solution vendor model actually works in practice. And there's a lot to come. Let's just mention a little bit about, if this resonates with you as a viewer, if you're in this situation or you can see it coming, you see it happening to people around you, the first thing that we suggest is just to do our free assessment that we created at thegigsolution.com. And interestingly enough, it's called the Solution Vendor Viability Assessment, if you want to talk about that for a second, John.
Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of people that would be good prospects for this methodology. And most of them say right out of the gate, because I hadn't given it any consideration, is, geez, I wonder if that's for me. I wonder if I've got what it takes. I wonder if I can learn how to find what my skills are, what my deliverables are, and be able to package them and promote them and do marketing. It's going to be a lot of new skills that maybe you haven't developed that much as a conventional employee. So what this assessment does is it gives you a very unbiased view as to, you've got what it takes. Or, you're a little shy here. You might be better off looking at other options. Because this isn't for everybody, James. All right, that's the sad truth.
Right.
It is for probably about 85% of the labor force that's been cut that we're talking about. But the reason why we do it is to give you the confidence that if you are applicable, this will work for you. And whatever effort or money or whatever you're willing to invest in making this new venture, it'll be that much more viable, and you won't be throwing money away if you're not appropriate.
Right. And, it only takes about 10 to 15 minutes. It will help you zero in on whether this is a good fit for you or not. And you can find it at thegigsolution.com, and there will also be a link below the video.
What's the charge for that?
It's free. We are interested in creating a chain of success stories, and we would rather shake hands and part friends with people who do the SVVA and say, hey, you know what, I don't see this as a good fit for me. We wish you the best of luck in whatever direction you decide to go, and we shake hands and part friends. We're not, we don't want people wasting their time and resources. We certainly don't want to waste our time and resources on something that isn't going to have a success story at the end of it.
So actually, there's no time like the present. It's there. You can find it on our website. What is that, right, James?
Thegigsolution.com.
Thegigsolution.com, and it's for free. Take the assessment today. We will receive it, and we will work with you on terms of how we move forward.
And it will actually give you, it will score you based on your responses. So, one of three tiers. You're a good fit, you're a pretty good fit, you're probably not the best fit. It's not set in stone, it's automated. So if you disagree with the outcome, we're happy to talk to you about why that is, and maybe it didn't come through in the SVVA. It's just step one, but it definitely helps, give some people some idea about whether or not, you yourself are going to feel like this is something you would want to do, or maybe you just want to go find another job, which, that's always a possibility. Last question. What are you most looking forward to in the conversations ahead in this series, both in this series about the program and also about, in conversations that will happen with people who start getting an awareness of this program and want to start speaking to us?
Well, again, my experience points to the fact that this is absolutely going to work and it's going to happen. And to answer your question, what really motivates me, what really gets me excited, is to be able to be in a position to provide the guidance necessary to help these people who are experiencing some incredible stress, identity loss, income loss. I mean, it goes on and on. And I know, I've spoken to enough people to know how difficult that is. We can help.
Okay, well, that's enough for episode 0, Spunk. Thanks. Always good to see you. I'm sure I'll be talking to you again later. If this, again, has resonated with anybody watching this, visit thegigsolution.com. Hit the Take the Assessment button that's right there at the top and see what this is all about. Next time, or in one of the upcoming episodes, we're going to be talking more about some of the most common questions we hear from people, some of the more common fears that we hear about when people considering becoming a solution vendor, whether or not it would be, something that they could actually do. And I'm confident that, that the gig solution, these upcoming episodes are going to speak to a lot of our audience and answer a lot of the things that's already swimming around in their mind. So, with the gig solution, our graduates don't apply, they vend. Thanks for checking in, and we'll see you again soon. I think that was much better. I think we had our stuff. We stayed.